Hey there, Wolfpack fans. It's me again, Kenzie Gibbs, bringing you another episode of Locked On Wolfpack. And today's episode is brought to you by the great folks over at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you talk to the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. The terms and conditions do apply. Now, folks, this was my first ever media days, and I would love to get into what a ball it was and how it was great meeting all the people who are ACC media members from other parts of the country that we don't get to interact with all the time there. But that's not why you're here. Okay, we're gonna break this thing down into a two-parter as far as what we learned in terms of conference and national landscape as the first episode. And the second will be uploaded tomorrow, and it'll be specifically things that we learned or that we heard from NC State folks. But first, we've got to start this thing off with a lot of heavy hitting statements, some intentional, some accidental on purpose, if you know what I'm saying, from Commissioner Jim Phillips about, what realignment looks like and how everything is moving in this new landscape of college football. So we've got all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Wolfpack.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, folks, the first thing, me and Brett talked about this a little bit on the last episode, and we talked about what the grant of rights meant and how that thing looked pretty ironclad as far as schools getting out of it and whatnot. But Commissioner Phillips must have been listening to us because he reiterated exactly how difficult this deal would be to get out of. Now, these are the words. Let me get the exact quote ready for you here that came straight from the mouth of Commissioner Phillips in terms of speaking about the grant of rights, as well as, why it wouldn't make sense for teams to leave per se. So you can follow the logic here, Phillips said, alluding to the grant of rights deal. I would think that the significance of what that would mean, the television rights that the conference owns, as well as a 9-figure financial penalty, I think it holds, but your guess is as good as mine. Now, here's the thing that I want to get into with that. I knew that the payout was going to be somewhere in the hundreds of millions or whatever the case may be, in terms of what it would take for somebody to leave the conference. However, they would still maintain the TV rights as well. Oh boy. Oh yeah. I will tell you this. Again, we've talked about how realignment has been happening and how it's all about the money. It's all about the greenbacks, the dollars. It's about, making sense with dollars and cents, right? I don't know a single university that can foot the bill of that, on top of the new conference not getting your TV rights right away and still being like, it's cool. I mean, like, things happen, it's just kind of how life goes sometimes, and we're all right with that. That is absolute madness. I mean, boy, even if your argument was, well, if it's only $120, $130 million payout and the ACC or the SEC and Big Ten are paying $40 million more, then you recoup your money in 4 years and then you make off like a bandit for the rest. That part would make sense, but it's the front end of that as far as the television rights that the conference owns, which was stated in this way in a very intentional manner. That's the part that's a little concerning, because what do you mean you got to pay out 9 figures and ACC was still? Yeah. Again, I said when this all first started, I did not think that there was going to be a ton of movement right away. And even if there were only a very limited amount of teams that could move. But after learning more about the grant of rights, after having folks read into it and tell me what they're thinking and what they're seeing with that, I mean, listen, everybody's got really good lawyers, and these teams are saying, well, I could make $30 million extra at this conference or this conference. And yet and still, we haven't heard a single announcement yet of anybody from the ACC moving on and moving out yet. We haven't. So with that in mind, I think that everything is going to stay put for a little while. I think it is. Again, I don't know anybody who's willing to give up the at least 100 some odd million, and then on top of that, still tell the conference that they're going to, hey, listen, we just got a few years of this conference having our TV rights, so if you could help us foot this bill or something, I don't see how that works out. I don't see, and again, I've talked about them before, and I hate to keep bringing them up, but the reality is Maryland is not a full partner or fully getting shares in the Big Ten and what they're doing. Neither is Rutgers. You gonna be partially shared in and having to pay all this money? In the words of Frank Religion, in the words of Frank Ocean, if it brings me to my knees, it's a bad religion. Let me tell you. You looking at it, it's folks gonna be crying and throwing up at them pay cuts and at the rollbacks that they're gonna have to do as a university if that were to be the case. So again, I think that one of the biggest things that was established here is not necessarily for the sake of the university, because I believe the universities already knew this and there wasn't too much doubt or anything there. But just from a fan perspective, just from folks listening, just from a media perspective for folks who didn't look deeply into it, I think that it just became more than clear that you're here to stay, you're here to stay. And so, with that being said, Commissioner Phillips, again, he had his opening address, said a lot of things that were pretty meaningful there, but he also said some things that were pretty meaningful intentionally, like the statement about the grant of rights. But he also said some things by mistake that were a little interesting. And again, was it a mistake or was it a mistake on purpose? Right? He said something about the ACC, all 17 of our teams. Well, now wait a minute. Now, even if you count in Notre Dame, which again they're a member for all sports except football, you're looking at 15. Who's the other two? What's going on? Now, the math is simply not mathing. And so we're going to put some math together and try to figure out what's going on here. Because again, I told you we were going to talk about what we knew first, and then we'll get into what are the unknowns a little bit. But the reality is, in knowing everything that we know about college football, about college sports, about what's happening in college sports right now, I said that the ACC was getting left behind in terms of staying the same, and that even if they do expand, it would be tough for them to get as big as a Texas, an Oklahoma, a USC, even a UCLA. It would be tough. That's a tough string to pull there. It's a tough act to follow in terms of who you want to get to join your conference. However, I think that this slip up by Phillips is it's kind of letting us know, hey, we got some things up. And some of y'all might not like this. I don't think that the things up the sleeve are as big as other schools, but I'll tell you about some of the rumblings and all that were going on there in just a second. But before we get into that, I've got to get into LinkedIn Jobs. As the sun comes out and small businesses are back in business, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people you want to interview faster and for free. Create a free job post in 10 minutes, or in minutes rather, on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So, folks, I think the next thing that we need to get into a little bit, the next thing that we need to talk about in terms of expansion is who could the teams be? Who could the teams be that are on the cusp and that are on the brink? Now, one team I'm sure y'all have heard a lot about, that I also have heard a lot of rumblings as far as it's pretty much all over, but the shouting coming over is West Virginia. That's a team that I've heard a lot about in terms of them being here. But then the question pops out of, well, who's next? Who's the next domino to fall? Who's the next team And I want y'all to learn something, or I want y'all to hear me and hear me well. I need y'all to read this caption if you are on YouTube, and I'm gonna say it very loudly into the mic right now for you. If you are listening on any of the audio only platforms, rule Notre Dame out of that race right now. Do you understand me? Do you understand me? Get it out of your head. Get it out of your mind. Listen, anything that has to do with a Golden Dome, with South Bend, Indiana, get it out of your mind. Do you understand me? They just signed a deal that is annually granting them $75 million to stay with ABC. Why would they leave that? Explain it to me as if I am a fifth grader. Explain to me why Notre Dame would leave that. Please. I would love, love to hear why they would leave that deal. I trust me, if anybody has any information on this, I would love to hear it. I would love to talk about where this information is coming from. Listen, talk to me. Talk to me. Okay. The thing that I'm hearing more than Notre Dame joining a conference would be potentially the Big 12 or what's left of it joining Notre Dame on NBC as a quote unquote sidekick. That's what I've heard. So this is, again, I could be wrong here. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I've been Or actually, you know what? Let me correct that. Let me correct that. They have not already signed for the 75 million, but they're currently looking at that. They're currently looking at that. That's what Notre Dame is eyeballing and wants. And even still, even if they don't get it, they're currently getting 22 a year. That's going through 2025 to stay with NBC. If they come anywhere near that 75 mark, if they come anywhere near that, they're not there would be no reason. There would be no reason. So again, let me correct that. They have not already signed for the 75 million. They have not received the 75 million, but that's what they're asking for. I think they're going to meet somewhere in the middle of 22 and 75. I think they're going to meet somewhere in the middle of that. But I'm telling you right now, the likelihood of them joining a conference, it's very slim. It's very, very slim. Unless NBC is talking some figures that just are like darn near a slap in the face. Again, this is slight retraction, slight editing here. They didn't sign a deal, but that's what they're looking for. That's what they're wanting in terms of their annual deal. But again, regardless of what you think, it's hard. You're going to be looking at a very, very tall task to say, oh yeah, it's going to make sense that Notre Dame is going to join the conference right now. At least until 2025, we know that Notre Dame is staying put with NBC. And even beyond that, again, you're looking at a situation where you'd have to match that revenue from just the TV deal alone before anything else gets involved. Just the TV alone, you're gonna have to match that part. So, it's there could be other complications going along with that, and we have seen things like the reality is Notre Dame has seen some not decline, or yeah, it's fair to say declining, some declining viewership. Their game against Air Force in Week 6 drew the lowest viewer rating in Notre Dame history with $1.5 million viewers. But still, 1.5 million viewers being extremely low is like that's that's a tall order. So NBC, I wouldn't be shocked if they did everything they could short of that 75 million to keep them, but they'll be in that ballpark, which again, could Notre Dame eventually join the ACC full time? Yes, absolutely. Let's not rule that out. But with that being said, are we expecting that anytime soon? Don't hold your breath, okay? Don't hold your breath. You know what I mean? The funerals are already it's too expensive in this economy to get buried. All right, just live your life out, and hopefully you know, go on to glory in a much better spot for your life. Now, who could the other teams be is the question, right? If we're looking at 17 and we say we already got 15, even if you throw in West Virginia at 16, who could the other teams be? I talked to folks. I pounded the pavement. I wanted to hear what different folks had to say in terms of, you know, how many or what teams could be in the race. And there was a lot of teams being thrown around. There were a ton. I mean, you know, you had everybody from the likes of a Memphis and things along that sort, up through, you know, going pretty far north, and I'm sorry, coming back to North Carolina in terms of like an App State or something like that. There were a lot of teams discussed, and there were rumblings about a lot of teams, none of which seemed to be as substantiated, as widespread, and like folks had as much in terms of like, yeah, this seems to be pretty much done as West Virginia. That seemed to be the one that was locked up. But who could the other teams be? I don't know. I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you I do. I would love to hear some of you all in the comments and on Twitter and all that. Talk to me. Tell me who you think the team could be. And you know, anybody who follows this show, who comments regularly and all that, they'll tell you I'm very responsive. I love to have the conversations, the back and forth of what should happen here. But who could the other teams be? That is an absolutely excellent question. But I think it kind of segues into the next question, which I think is a slightly bigger and more important question in terms of what another thing Commissioner Phillips said. All the options are on the table in terms of closing the revenue gap. What are the options? Like, what realistically, what are the things that the teams in the ACC could do to functionally close that gap? Or the ACC as a conference, what is it that the ACC could do to close that gap? Because we all know the biggest thing, the largest chunk of all of this, beyond ticket sales, beyond, you know, all that, it's always going to be the media rights deals. And the same thing that is holding the conference together is also kind of holding the conference hostage in that way. That what what are you going to do? We know nobody should be expecting that gap to be bridged between what the ACC payouts are expected to be and what the SEC and Big Ten payouts are supposed to be. That's not logical. That's not common sense. You're violating on a lot of levels if that's your belief. But I genuinely am curious. I would have loved to have like a 20-minute sit down in terms of like, okay, so other options on the table. You don't have to tell me all of them. You don't have to, you know, just let me in on a few of them in terms of what are things that the ACC is looking at in terms of closing that revenue gap. What could potentially be on the table? Because again, the TV deal is the biggest part of it, but where else would the revenue come from? Like, what's going on in terms of that to say, like, even if you were to say, hey, everybody who works for the ACC takes like a significant pay cut and that all goes to the university, that would not be much to the universities. Realistically, that would not be much at all. So what are you looking at in terms of, hey, we're going to generate new revenue, we're going to find new revenue streams to close this gap? Where could that potentially be? You've already got your all, of course, all of the bowl games and all that, and all of the relationships there. You've already got the conference championship being sponsored by all of these different brands and all that. So what more can happen here? This is a very interesting question, and I'm betting that the answer is even more interesting. And if you're a better, to .net. .net continues to be the number one for all sporting needs. Bet Online is the best place to get the latest and most recent odds and trends for all of your sports betting action. Bet Online not only has uh, a mobile feature where you can go online via your mobile device to learn more about the action, but it's also available on your browser. So find reviews and news of every league, including MLB, and the NFL, NBA, NHL, and combat sports. Even esports and golf are included. You name it, they've probably got some action going on it. So go to Bet Online, where the game starts. So, folks, we're about to land this thing, but long story short, I think that we're in a very interesting place in time as a conference. And in the next episode, we will be touching on the things that we learned specifically about NC State, or the things that we learned specifically from the combination of players and coaches who were there. It was Dave Doran, Devin Leary, Isaiah Moore, and Drake Thomas. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that they said that were pretty interesting, and some of the things that, again, we learned that it kind of made you go, really? That can't be true. That feels like it's not true, but it is. With the season coming up, with as many expectations and as high of hopes in Raleigh as we've seen in quite some time for any of our three teams that have gone through this the conference championship drought, we're in for a great episode. So stick around for that episode of Locked On Wolfpack. But thank you all so very much for coming out with this one. Peace and love, y'all, and as always, go Pack.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.